What's up, guys? Welcome back to Building a Better Beat, episode 3. This one's going to be called Drum Rack and Effects Chain. It's basically going to be how I like to affect my drums, some different things I like to do with them in the mix. I'm going to briefly go over New York compression and parallel compression. Not going to waste any more time. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you guys so much for coming back. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to go over some of the basic things I like to do with the drums. I'll start with the things I do to pretty much every kit. The first step is obviously to kind of go through and make sure nothing is overbearingly loud and nothing is mixed weirdly. So we're going to go menu, pad mixer, and that's going to take us to the pad mixer where we can bring down the volume of anything that's a little too abrasive. So I'm going to play along with my little loop and see if any of these one shots come across too loud. That open hi-hat's obviously a little loud, so I'm gonna just go to its pad here and bring that down a little bit. Maybe even one more. That's better. That's a little loud too. That tambourine. Let me bring that down a little bit. Alright, so now I've got my levels pretty much where I like them. Now, I don't boost too much on this page. Maybe boost 1 or 2, but you still want to make sure you're not peaking. You can always mix up later, but if you get to that mixing stage and you have a bunch of stuff peaking all over the place, it's going to be a real pain to bring everything back into line. So I recorded a little drum beat into this, and it's a little disjointed because I tried to hit all the parts in my kit so that you can hear each part as we go through and as we make changes. So I'm going to go to the main page, make sure you have your drum program selected, and I'm going to go to Inserts. In the MPC, this is basically where you can put 4 effects right on top of the program. So for almost every drum program, I'm going to throw on a little bit of reverb. So I'm going to go to the air reverb, and I'm going to just give it a basic small. I'm going to bring it down in the mix a little bit, maybe 8-9%. Just a small room, a small room reverb. Again, you can recreate this on any DAW. Why don't I play out my little drum beat here, and I'll play it without, and then I'll play it with, and you can hear the difference. Hear how much more lively the little bit of reverb makes it sound. Here's without. All right, so there's no reverb. Just a little bit. Just really brings everything up in liveliness and makes things sound more alive. Cool. I pretty much always will throw a small light reverb on my drums, especially when producing them. I think it just gives them a more lively sound. The next thing I want to talk about is a very important technique if you're trying to make this kind of sound, which is called parallel compression, also referred to as New York compression. Basically, the theory of it is that you are sending one signal that is uncompressed and one signal that is compressed. So you can do this in pretty much any DAW. You'll have to see how the chaining works in your particular DAW, but I'm going to show you the way that I think is easiest to do it to individual drum hits in the MPC Live. So we're in our drum program, and basically I'm going to add a little bit to the snare and to the kick for the sound we want to achieve. So I'm going to go menu, right? And I'm going to go to channel mixer. And I'm going to scroll here over to the returns. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got 4 returns here, and you can mix them however you like. I'm going to highlight return 1, and I'm going to go to its inserts, and I'm going to add the air compressor. You could do this with any compressor, whatever you want. And one of the presets I think is great to start with is in the bus section. You can go to beefy. That's a decent one for giving you the kind of sound you want to hear. Okay, so now return 1 has that air compressor on it. So I'm going to hit menu, and I'm going to go back to pad mixer, and I'm going to click the tab here that says send. So these 4 little lights underneath send, that is return 1, 2, 3, and 4. So go to return 1, make sure that's highlighted. click the bass drum. Now I'm going to play the beat, and I'm going to add some parallel compression as we go, and you'll hear the effect. You hear how much more meat that kick has now? Again, without and with. You don't want to overdo it. I was just going real high on it so you could hear how much of an effect it makes. You want it to be, almost imperceptible. But what it's going to do is going to beef up that attack phase of your kick so much by adding a little bit of crunch in there. So you can already hear how much heavier that kick is hitting. So I'm going to leave it down here at like negative 11 dB. So I'm also going to add that to my snare because it's the same purpose basically. So let me crank it on the snare a little bit and listen to how much it changes the snare. Hear that? How much more presence does that snare have now? So that's like, it's almost universally using this technique in some form or another. A lot of guys also use this on rap vocals. It's really great. It adds a lot of beefy presence to your vocals. Just to wrap that idea up, the theory again is that you want to have one clean signal and then you want to send going off to the same sound somewhere else with a very heavily compressed signal. And then you want to kind of bleed that in a little bit. And it just adds a lot more meat to what you're doing. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is like simple lo-fi downsampling. It adds a little bit more grit and a little bit more color. It can kind of simulate like a tape machine or a record player, like a drum break you took from vinyl. If you're getting one shots from sample packs, they just don't have that. They just don't have that same sound. So I'm going to go over here again to the main drum program on the main menu, and I'm going to go to the inserts for it. And I'm going to go to number 2. Now on the MPC, this is super easy. But basically what you want to be looking for if you're on a DAW is your downsamplers, even some distortion effects, things like that. And obviously like the SP or other things like that have a vinyl sim. Basically, you're just crunching up the sound and simulating a cheaper recording interface. A lot of the guys back in the day would even run their mix or their drum bus through some beat up old tape machine and back, to give it that saturated sound. On the MPC, you have this option where if you just go to the inserts for your main program, open up a new one, I'm going to scroll down to the lo-fi, air lo-fi effects. Not bad. I think I like it, but I just use it very minimally. So let's see. I'm going to start with the preset of Vintage Hardware 2. And I'm going to bring it way down in the mix, maybe like 10%, 8%. You could also throw this on a bus and do it that way, whatever you want to do. For the drums, I try to reserve those returns for more fine-tuning than this. Basically, I want to just add this to the drum program and nothing else. So I might as well drop it on one of these 4 insert channels. So we got the lo-fi effects. I went to Vintage Hardware 2, scrolled it down to about 8 in the mix. And now let's turn it off and here's the beat without it. And here's the beat with it. Bring it up in the mix a little so you can hear it. Hear how it's crunching your drums all down. So you obviously don't, you may for some circumstances want it to be that crunched, but basically you want to come back down. I find like no more than 20 or so percent. But flavor to taste, season to taste, just like a cook. So what I'm trying to achieve is more of a vinyl analog recording sound, basically, but use it however you want to use that. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the lo-fi effects. Now let's talk about another important thing for mixing your drums, which is transient shapers. I'm going to go to menu, and I'm going to go to pad mixer, and I'm going to go to my snare, my main snare here. Now, your snare is meaty. That sounds good with the reverb and the lo-fi on it. It sounds good. It's got some near compression, so it's really hitting you in the ears. But what if you wanted to hit even more than that? Let's go to the inserts for that one pad. There's the Air Effects Transient Shaper, which I'm going to use in a second on something else. But so far, I have found the earlier gen Transient on the MPC to work better for this particular use. So I'm going to go all the way down to the Transient Shaper here, select it, pencil icon, and I'm going to go to mid attack for now. Let's see what we got. Hear how much more presence that is, and it's almost got a flam effect. So that's a little heavy. So I'm going to go back to low, and I'm going to, actually I liked that. Actually, I'm going to bring it to full attack, and then I'm going to lessen it a little bit. Give it a little more release. Basically, what you can do with a Transient Shaper is you can enhance that attack phase and or lessen the decay of an individual sound. So you've got, with this one, it's real simple. You've got dry, wet, you've got the output of it, and you've got the attack and the release. Real simple. But so for this, I'm kind of playing in between, and what you can do is like boost up that attack so it's real kicking. See how much more that snare kind of jumps into your ears? I'm even going to take it down a little because I want a little aggressive. And see, you could bring off the release and make it a real short snare if you wanted. I just find that this one sounds better when you're trying to enhance the attack phase of a snare, personally. I mean, the Air Transient is great, and I use it for other things, which I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so that's throwing a Transient on that snare. It helps give it a little more life, you know. Now I'm going to go over to my main hi-hat here, pad 3. I'm bringing that hi-hat's volume up a little so you can hear more what I'm doing. So there's the hi-hat. I'm going to go to the hi-hat. I'm going to go to the inserts. I'm going to scroll down on the first one, and I'm going to go to the Air Transient this time. So I find that the onboard Transient is a little better at like enhancing the attack phase of a snare, but I definitely think the Air Transient is better at dealing with the release. It's generally a better piece of software, but I think it's more suited for dealing with your releases than it is with your attacks. I don't know why. That's just me. So I'm going to put on that Transient. I'm going to open it up with the pencil, and I'm going to go to the preset for... more attack, less sustain. And let's hear the hi-hat now. Taking it off. Hear that? Now I'm going to bring that hi-hat back down to where it was, the level, but I just brought it up in volume so you could hear how much of a difference that's making in the sound. It helps make your hi-hats a little more subconscious. So if your hi-hats are a little too aggressive in the mix, or you feel like your hi-hats are too present, that's a good idea. Another solution for hi-hats that are just a little too loud in the mix is to, again, on the inserts here, I'm going to go down to the auto pan and put a very, very light and slow pan on your hi-hats so that they're washing very lightly back and forth, and it really helps your hi-hats sound more like an actual drummer. So listen, I just put on the pan. So I'm going to turn it off, but here's the hi-hat part in the drums. And now on. If you can see, it just really helps your hi-hats. They retain their presence, but they just aren't as abrasive, and they feel a lot more humanized if you put a little bit of a light pan on them. There's a lot of other things you could do. You could do light phasers, things like that. Any kind of modulation will help humanize those hi-hats. So now if you notice that kick is just a little too present. So I'm going to go to my program edit, right? Menu, program edit. And I'm going to go to my filter envelope, and And where's my kick? You could always go over to the amp envelope and put a little bit of a slope on the attack phase. Much better. Much better. Now that we're here on the envelope phase, let me talk real quick about filtering your bass down. I have like a kind of the attack phase has a relatively high pitch in there, and it's a pretty present kick. Sounds a lot like just a normal bass drum from a drummer. But let's say you wanted to give yourself one of those deep sloshy kicks like a Tribe Quest or Dilla. Basically, you just want to low pass the hell out of it and find the sweet spot and then resonate the hell out of that. You know what I mean? So up here, you've got your filter. So I'm going to go to make sure you're on that one pad. Go to your resonance, crank it up to 30 or 40 so you'll hear the change. Basically, the lower you are, the less bleed there is from the higher frequency. So if you're on number 1, that's a lot less bleed from that higher range. But let's start with 2 for now. So you have a little more bleed from the high range. And I'm going to bring down the cutoff. So I'm finding my sweet spot right around there, 35. Something like that. If you wanted to have even a little more meat, you could throw on the envelope and bring back the decay. So you retain a little bit of that original sound before it filters. Now, obviously, that kick drum doesn't match that snare, but I was just showing you how you could do that. So I'm going to come back to take all that off, all that we just did, take it off, and go back to our original kick. So that shows you how you could do one of those Dilla kind of low-end, low-pass kicks if you wanted to. Another thing that's fun to do if you want to really enhance your kick more, you can come over here, go to Menu, Channel Mixer, and we're going to go back to our returns. And we've got return 1 doing something, so I'm going to go to return 2, and I'm going to add in the air stereo width. Now this is basically going to project the sound out to, a wider range. And I find with kicks, there's a lot of fun stuff you can get out of that. So you could either trim it out of the middle and keep it just at the sides, or you could just grind the bass up so it's real intense. I'll often use this on my bass lines also. I just find it's great to send a little bit of your bass line to something with some stereo width. It really beefs it up. If you're having trouble having your bass lines heard or you're having trouble hearing them in the mix, try that. So I'm going to give it the preset of wider bass. However, that's a very intense preset. So I'm going to bring the width down. See if you can see everything is cranked to shit. So I'm going to bring the pan trim down a little bit. I'm going to bring the level trim down quite a bit because the level trim was boosting it plus 11 decibels. I'm going to bring it down to 4, and I'm going to bring the delay back because I don't really want it to delay that much, and especially if you put the bass on it, you don't really want it to delay that much. The kick, it's not as important, but the bass, the delay is going to affect the sound. And bring the width down to 150, something like that, but still keep only low end because it's just for kicks, so who cares? So we've got return 2 set up with all that stereo width, and now I'm going to go back to Menu, Pad Mixer, and you got my kick again selected, and going to go to Send To now, remember, so click that tab the second time and you'll see that the second light highlights, and that's going to be now the value I change is going to be how much of that return comes in. So just select your kick and add a little bit of that return. See what I'm saying? much meatier is that? So I went a little far just to give an example, but I'm going to bring it back a little bit. Pretty nice. Yeah, so I'm just, again, I'm doing a lot of this stuff at an exaggerated way to show you the theory of it. But, you know, you're going to have to, with all of this stuff, flavor to taste, all of this stuff is kind of take it with a grain of salt, use it where it's needed, not where it's not needed. Don't overuse it. A lot of these techniques, especially like the New York compression, especially the stereo width, those will get really overbearing in your mix if you don't have an easy hand with them. So you want to have a really gentle hand. At the risk of overdoing it with these drums, let's talk about a little distortion. I'm going to go to menu and I'm going to go to pad mixer again, and I'm going to highlight my kick, let's say, and go to its inserts, just the kick. And let's throw a little distortion. And the preset I'll start with is fat bass drum, ironically enough. Woo! It's still way too much. And I'm going to bring that down in the mix. Now, you could do these on sends and returns and do it that way, but since the air distortion has a mix option, you can actually kind of do that inside the program and inside the pad. Whereas we've only got 4 returns, so I don't want to overdo it in case I need returns for something later. So since I've got the space on the pad itself, I'm going to add that to the pad. Let's bring it down in the mix a bit. But man, listen to that. Listen to how much more beef that got. Distortion's key, man. Distortion is key for giving your drums more beef too. Distortion, saturation, all that stuff is really important. All right, so let's talk about the snare. Same thing, go to the effects, grab a little distortion, and guess which one we're going to put on as a preset. It's fat snare drums. Again, way too much right off the bat, but if we bring our mix back, basically the reason those are so much off the bat is that they are set up like, well, you can put it on a return, and if you put it on a return, you'd be gradually adding a little bit of that, but I want to bring it back in the mix on any of these ones that have a mix option. Listen to that kick and snare now, huh? Now, another overarching thing that's real easy for the MPC that I just want to quickly go over, if you go back to your main program here and go to your inserts, in the MPC Live series, they have these 3 awesome MPC and SP simulators, which I think are pretty great, honestly. There's no settings on them. They're literally just a filter to drop on top of your beat or on top of your entire project. I find them good for enhancing certain parts of your drums if you want to. Specifically, the MP60 really gives a lot of beef to your kick. I think the MPC 3000 filter does a lot to enhance the overall mix of your drums or even the overall mix of your track. And then, of course, the SP and the SP ring give you a nice snare. Like, you know, if you're looking to get towards... If you're trying to move towards like large pro, Pharaoh Monk, that kind of like slap and crack snare, and you want it to really have that loud attack, almost no decay, that's, you know, start fooling with the SP12 one. I usually use the MPC 60 because I think it enhances the bass a lot more and makes things warmer, which is generally what I'm trying to go for. So I'm going to throw that on here and listen to the difference. All right, here's the drums without it. Here's with it. Now, it's definitely not for every circumstance, and it can be a bit much, especially if you're using it in conjunction with downsamplers or lo-fi effects. It can be a lot, but I think they're really great, and it's awesome that they thought to throw them in there, and I really like them, personally. I use the 60 a lot to give my kick just a little more pronunciation. I think it's great. Okay, so we got that there. All right, for this next one, I'm gonna take off the MPC 60 and the lo-fi because it's gonna get a little bit much otherwise. Let's Here's the drums with those taken off. Still good, but you can just hear it overall has a less lively sound. A little too clean, maybe. So the next one is kind of a funny Russian doll chicken and egg one. Questlove kind of is the first guy I saw doing this in his mixes with his real drums to try to get them to sound more like produced drums. If you're building your kits with a lot of lifelike drum sounds like I like to, sometimes you're going to want to like crunch them up a little or make them grittier or whatever. Something Questlove did a lot was add guitar simulators to his entire drum kit, or maybe just to the snare or just to different parts, to add this amazing crunchy distortion that sounds like an old drum machine. So basically any DAW has like these guitar amp filters and guitar amp simulators. And on the MPC, a good way to do it is with the fuzz wah, just without any wah. You know, I mean, you could play with the wah, but you know, if you kill the wah and start playing with the fuzz of it, you hear if you take it too far, it starts to get the same problem as the lo-fi effects and the down samplers. It just gets too crazy, it just gets too many artifacts and it gets really messed up. But if you do this if you do this minimally, you can have a lot of the same effect. Like that's pretty nice. Still a little crunchy, but it's nice. I find it gives you it gives some real nice character and color to drums, and especially if you're trying to program live sounding drums, it's tough to make them human sounding. And this is coming from somebody who's played drums for over 20 years, so it really is tough to make them humanized. But a lot of this adding color, adding vibrancy, adding modulation, all of that stuff is helping to get these drums to sound more like a person. I feel like that's a pretty good breakdown of a lot of the basics of how I would like to approach my drum rack. I certainly wouldn't use those all on one drum track. I just wanted to walk you through several different things you can do to meeten up your drums, liven up your drums, and how I basically run my drum effects chains. Episode 3, we did it. We're here. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Episode 3, I really appreciate you guys coming back again. All the feedback, all the support is hugely appreciated. I'm going to keep on rolling, baby. Episode 4 will be coming soon. I hope this was helpful. Thank you guys. Peace and love. As always, be good to each other.